We're awesome. Great. Welcome everyone to our session today. So today's session, are you truly agile? Exploring agile values and principles. Today, we're really going to be looking at what agile is. So let's start with this. When you think of agile, what word or phrase comes to your mind? When you think of agile, what word or phrase comes to your mind? In the chat window, type in one word or phrase that comes to your mind when you think of agile. What word or phrase comes to your mind when you think of agile? In the chat window, type in what you think of when you hear the word agile. Workshopping. Yep. Project management system, flexible, right? Very bendy. Oh, very bendy. That's a good way to say flexible too. John, what does workshopping mean? What do you mean by workshopping? John, if you can hear me, what does workshopping mean? I think it sounds good. I'm a bid writer, so I tend to come to Agile as a facilitator. Very nice. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So let's talk a bit. What we're going to talk about today is what Agile really is and is not. I like a lot of the words we have here. It's intuitive, flexible, workshopping. We'll talk about this. Let me first, before we start, introduce myself. My name is Richard Chang. I'm the VP of Training and Chief Product Owner here at Next Step Solutions. I have a series of certifications, the most relevant one of which is, actually, I guess none of them are really that relevant for our talk today, but I do a lot of training. I'm based here in Reston, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. Also, if you like, in the chat window, type in what city and state you're coming in from, and country, if you're outside the country. I am here in Reston, VA. In the chat window, Boston. All right, great. Very nice. Boston in the house. I'm here in Reston, Virginia, outside DC. Feel free to type in your city and state if you like in the chat window. Woodbridge, Savannah, Bulgaria. Oh, nice. So Bulgaria right now, that's Stanko. I think right now you currently win the longest, the award for furthest away. Scott's in DC. We have Illinois. That's fantastic. A lot of my background is in government, commercial, nonprofit, and association work. And I know from the folks in the room that we have folks in different sectors. We have some folks here that do work with or for the government. We have some folks here that work for commercial companies, and some folks here work with nonprofits or associations. We'll talk through some of that. Oh, it looks like India may be the winner for furthest away from me now. We have India and Saudi Arabia. Well, thank you for joining us from all over, as close as Washington, D.C., and as far away as India and Saudi Arabia. That's fantastic. Here's my contact information. I am going to copy and paste this in the chat window. I'm going to copy and paste this contact information in the chat window. So in the chat window, you now have my contact information. Feel free to join me on LinkedIn. Feel free to join our company, Next Step Solutions, on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. Feel free to follow our company, Next Step Solutions, on Twitter as well. Anna is in Denver, but home base is Virginia. That's great. Denver seems lovely. Oh, a couple quick notes before we start class. So Next Step Solutions, we do provide a whole slew of training. We have our Scrum Alliance courses. We have, which includes a Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner, Agile Leadership, the advanced classes as well. We offer classes from Kanban University, the Kanban system design and Kanban systems improvement. We offer some SAFe classes. We offer some DevOps classes, as well as Agile testing, test automation, Agile facilitation. If you have any training needs, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is www.nextupsolutions.com. I put that in the chat. We also offer Agile services. Agile services include services for the enterprise, for teams, and for leaders. We offer assessments. We offer team coaching, enterprise coaching, leadership coaching, 360 assessments, Agile maturity assessments, Agile readiness assessments, a whole slew of different Agile coaching and Agile services, Agile support, Scrum Master support, leadership support, also all sorts of support. So feel free to reach out to us for any of your Agile needs. Now, with that said, Let's get started. This is the Agile Manifesto. In the chat window, type in yes if you have seen this before. Type in no if you have not seen this before. In the chat window, type in yes if you've seen this before. Type in no if you've not seen this before. Okay, cool. It's new to some of you. That's awesome. Some of you have not seen this before, and some of you have seen this before. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a moment to read this to yourself. And as you're reading this, what I want you to think to yourself is this. Think about, as you read this to yourself, what it is about this you might like. But think about any questions, thoughts, or concerns this might raise as well. So think about what it is about this you might like, but think about any questions, thoughts, or concerns this might raise as well. So go ahead and take a moment to read this to yourself and think about what it is about this you might like, and think about any questions, thoughts, or concerns this might raise as well. All right, so let's start with the first thing. Anyone read this and realize, okay, there's definitely things I like about this. Anyone here have something they like about the manifesto? What do we like about the manifesto? What's one thing that you like about the Agile Manifesto in terms of what you're reading here? Type it in chat. Respond to change. Yes, Allison, go ahead and talk about that for a second. What do you, by responding to change, what do you like about that? Allison, if you have audio capabilities, what do you like? What do you like about that? Yeah, we can come back to Allison. Melanie, you said you like that it highlights the people. Melanie, audioly, what do you like about that?
It makes it for a a collaborative, fun interaction instead of being so into process and the tools, which are also important, but obviously adds value to the work that's being produced. But while we're doing the work, having a good work environment.
That sounds great. And I think a couple of you mentioned that as well. Scott says it values people. John likes the customer collaboration. Felix, walk us through what you wrote. Left column elements are about flexibility and people. What does that mean, Felix? Left column is about flexibility and people.
So the way I look at it, I mean, the right column is clearly about sort of structure and rigidity, right? Mm-hmm. The discipline that we were also familiar with. But the left one is much more open to, working things out with people and an investment in human beings and being adaptive, right? So, it's what's interesting to me about that is that in my own work experience, that's what I've been wrestling with bosses and boards and stuff over the years, to be much more on the left than on the right. But ultimately you end up being on the right because of directives and such.
Yeah, those are all great points. Those are all awesome points. Very nice. Ratna, you said it values co-creation. What does that mean?
I have seen this slide in ITL V4 where it is actually says we need to give importance to the left, the written items on the left over the right ones. I've seen this in ITL V4, and it values the value co-creation, where you actually make the customer part of your process and everything that you do. So, and you are creating value. It's co-creation is like you're having the customer from end to end, and you're creating value together.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Great points. Now, as you read this, who thinks to himself and thinks, it's not that I don't like this, but this definitely raises some questions, thoughts, or concerns. So in the chat window, type in yes if you read this to yourself and you think, it's not that I don't like this, but I have some questions, thoughts, or concerns. If you have some questions, thoughts, or concerns, type in yes in the chat window. Right? When you look at this and you realize, it's not that I don't necessarily like it, but there's some things I'm concerned about, or some questions I have, or some issues, or some thoughts. Yeah. Stanko, what is one of your questions, thoughts, or concerns?
I definitely like it, like working software, for example, over comprehensive documentation. However, at the end of the release, I still need to get to that documentation and fill it in and attach it to all the relevant tasks and releases, etc. So, yeah.
No, it's a good point. That's a good point. Melanie, I see what you're saying here. You're so used to planning, process, and documentation. I've heard people say this. I've heard people say stuff like, hey, we're doing Agile now, so we're not writing documentation anymore. We're doing Agile now, so we're not giving estimates anymore. We're doing Agile now, so we're not working towards due dates anymore, right? Is that what Agile means, right? Does Agile mean that does Agile mean we're ignoring the items on the right? Right, John, I see your note. My concern is I work for an organization that uses Agile, right? But when I approach for bid management, it's like it's not a thing. Is it possibly a thing? We'll talk about that. Right? Felix, you wrote, ultimately, we don't need to move to the right side to demonstrate outcomes. Yeah. Stanko, we prioritize the things on the left, but we don't ignore them on the right. That's a very good point, Stanko. Very good point. So this is probably explained best via a quick history lesson. So in the 90s, in the 80s going to 90s, we got really bad at software, You'll notice, by the way, this is the Agile Manifesto for software development. You'll notice that the word software is embedded in here, developing software, working software, because the history behind this was in software. However, in today's world, we've seen it extend outside of software. I've done it before for political teams, fundraising teams, real estate teams, biotech teams, marketing teams, sales teams. And so if you're doing this outside of software, you replace the word developing software with developing product or developing value. Working software gets replaced with working product or working value. But the history behind this is indeed in IT. And what we had here is this. So in the 80s going to the 90s, we got really bad at IT, really bad. And the concept was a project would fail. And because this project failed, it required more oversight. So we added more oversight. A project would fail. Because it failed, we added more governance. A project would fail, and because it failed, we added more documentation. But as we added more documentation, more oversight, more governance to our projects ended up failing more and more frequently. And what we saw in the 90s was an uprising of lightweight models to address that. Models like Scrum and Kanban and Crystal and RUP, which is Rational Unified Process, XP, Extreme Programming, Rapid Spiral Prototyping, VSDM, excuse me. We saw an uprising of a lot of lightweight models. And finally, in 2001, a group of 17 IT thought leaders got together and identified, all right, what are we doing here? What are we fundamentally getting wrong? What do we need to be doing better? And this is what they came up with at a high level, right? So what they saw was the items on the right, they saw that we had kind of focused too much on the right. The analogy I like to make is if I think of myself as a carpenter or a craftsman, I have my tools. I have my hammers, I have my chisels, I have my saws. And sometimes I'll walk up to a tool with my hammer and hit something very hard with my hammer because that's what that job entails. Sometimes I walk up to the job with my hammer and tap it very lightly with my hammer because that's what that job entails. And sometimes I walk up to the job with my hammer and I realize, wait a minute, that's not a nail, that's a screw. The only thing the hammer is going to do is damage. Put the hammer down, you need a drill or screwdriver. That's a different job. Right. The right side here is the equivalent of our hammers, our chisels, our saws, our drills, and our screwdrivers. It's not a one size fits all. We as the experts have to use them as appropriate to do the job. And what these experts saw in 2001 is, in essence, we had overcorrected on the right. So then what they looked at is, what do we need to be doing better? So they thought about what are some of the best products in the world, the best teams in the world, some of the best organizations in the world, and what separates the best from everyone else. And what we saw was a focus and culture on the left. Some quick examples. Number one, individuals' interactions over process and tools. Every place you go to will have some kind of process and tool place. And there are some things you can do to optimize it. But I'll say this. When I work with some of the most high functioning, best places in the world, places where you have highly engaged workforces, highly satisfied customers, high quality product, when I get to some of the best companies and best organizations in the world, it's not the process and tools that jump out at me in some of the best places I've been to. What really jumps out at me in some of the best and highest performing places I've been to, it's the people there and how they work together. Excuse me. That's what really stands out. Now, when I go to places that aren't high functioning, that aren't the best, what's interesting is this. When I go to places that are underperforming, when I go to places that are very kind of have a low level of performance, what's interesting about those places is that it's not the process and tools that jump out at me there. It's the people there and how they tend to work together. That's what I observe in places that are nowhere near high functioning. In fact, I'll say this. Any place I've ever been to that has a primary focus or singular focus on process and tools as a primary or singular form of communication that has never once been a good thing, it's always signaled amongst the most toxic of environments. Point number one is this. Every place you go to will have some kind of process and tool in place, but it's your people and how they work together. That's where the magic happens. That's point number one. Point number two is this. Look, we're not ignoring the documentation. Some of you are in highly regulated industries. Some of you might be in banking or in the government or in other highly regulated industries where you can't tell your auditors, you can't tell your overseers, you can't just say, hey, we're doing Agile now, trust us, we're good. It doesn't work that way, right? Documentation is important. But for this second point here, I believe in this concept. Minimal viable bureaucracy. What's the least amount I can do to responsibly meet the need? Because by definition, anything less is irresponsible, but by definition, anything more is excessive. One of the things I talk about in my classes is anytime we create documentation whatsoever, I always ask two questions. Who's it for and how are they going to use it? And then based on that answer, that determines how we create the document. So for example, let's say we had documentation that I needed for the auditors. What I would do is I would meet with the auditors. I would say, auditors, what do we need in this document? Then what I would do is I would produce just a little bit less than I know they need, right? And I would say, auditors, here's what I have so far. Can we work together to fill in the gaps, right? That way you don't end up with a stack of paperwork you don't want. I don't end up with writing a bunch of stuff that wastes both our time. Minimal viable bureaucracy, documentation just enough, just in time, with a focus on the working product. The documentation supports the product. It's not the product itself. That's the point here. Point number three, customer collaboration. 1 second, please. I got a tickle in the back of my throat, but it's not COVID because I gave myself a COVID test at home last night, and it's not that, so that's good. I do have a little tickle in my throat, so if I cough, that's why. Point number three is this. Customer collaboration, contract negotiation. Look, I'm a vendor. I get paid. Contracts help us get paid, right? But anyone ever been in a situation where you were told these people over here are off limits to you? You are not allowed to talk to these people. You have to talk to this other person over here instead. So you do, and that person doesn't even know anything. Anyone been in that situation before? Here's the point on this third bullet is, look, we have our contracts, but as a responsible implementer, I'm not just trying to fulfill a contract, hopefully giving you value. What I want to do is I want to create real solutions that solve real problems and that deliver real value. And to do that, we have to collaborate with the right people to make sure that what we're building is the right thing and is very valuable, right? We'll make the contracts work, but the customer collaboration is how we verify that what we build is of high value. That's the point here. Last point, following a plan, responding to change. There's some misconception in Agile that we don't have a plan. We absolutely do have a plan. In fact, for those of you that are familiar with a model like Scrum, this is the Scrum big picture, right? So we definitely have a plan. But here's the point. The point here is that we have a plan that gets us to the value, but the plan itself is not the value, right? And if what we learn day to day requires us to make changes to the plan to achieve that value, then by definition, we have to have a plan that's adaptable enough to encompass what we learn day to day to still achieve that value. Right? So I think like someone else pointed out earlier, we're not ignoring these items on the right, right? The items on the right are things we do, right? They're things we do, but what we want is a culture and focus on the left. Things on the right are things we do, but what we want is a culture and focus on the left. That's the concept, right? This last line is very important. That is, while there's value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. Any questions about that? All right, give me one moment, please. So that's the Agile Manifesto. At a high level, this is what they came up with. Now, at a deeper level, here are the 12 principles behind the Agile Manifesto. And what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise. We're going to do an exercise. So here's the exercise we're about to do. First thing I need everyone to do is, let me share my, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to break you up into breakout rooms. I'll put about 4 or 5 people in each breakout room. And in your breakout rooms, you're going to talk through a series of scenarios. So here's what I want everyone to do. In the chat window, I've placed the link, or I'm placing a link right now. In the chat window, I'm placing a link. So click on that link in the chat window. Click on that link in your chat window. And when you do, you should see a page that looks like this. Everyone see this page? Let me know if anyone has problems accessing this. Let me know if anyone has problems accessing this. All right, does everyone see this? All right, here's what we're going to do next. Let me create the breakout rooms. Give me 1 second while I create the breakout rooms. One moment, please. All right, so in the breakout rooms, what you're going to do, one moment, please, is you are going to work together to fill in these blanks. You're going to work together to fill in these blanks. Give me 1 second while I fix these rooms a little bit, just to make them a bit more evenly spread. All right, so in the breakout rooms, here's what you're going to do. You are given 3 scenarios, scenarios A, B, and C. For each scenario, what you're going to talk about is, does that scenario align with one or more of these 12 principles, or does it conflict with one or more of these 12 principles? So you have 3 scenarios here. For each scenario, you're going to identify, does it align with one or more of these 12 principles, or does it conflict with one or more of these 12 principles? Now, if it aligns with the 12th principle, identify which principle does it best align with. Or if it conflicts with one of the 12 principles, identify which principle does it most conflict with. Okay. Now, one quick note is that number 12 is a great principle. It says that over time, we reflect and get better. So don't use number 12 as the best answer. Number 12 is a great principle, but don't use number 12 as the best answer. Now, any questions before I open up the breakout rooms for you folks to have this conversation in? Okay, you're going to work together as a team, walk through these 3 scenarios. I'll give you 7 minutes in the room to do this. Actually, I'll give you 7 minutes. 7 minutes room to do this. Walk through these principles and walk through these 3 scenarios, A, B, and C. For each one, identify if there are lines or conflicts, which one does the best conflict with or most align with in terms of these 12 principles. Any questions before I put you in the breakout rooms? Remember to put yourselves off mute in the breakout rooms and have this conversation. Opening up the rooms now. Have fun. it looks like I have team one here. Team one, are you done in the breakout rooms?
I'm assuming that was our group.
Anna,
So yeah,
Blaine, Morrow, and Stanko.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome back. Just hang tight for about another minute and a half, and we'll let the other folks finish up. Excuse me. Got a tickle in my throat. Welcome, Charlie. We are just finishing up an exercise, so hang tight for about another 50 seconds before I close out the breakout rooms. Be closing out rooms in about 10 seconds. Closing the rooms now. All right, I think everyone is back with me. Let's talk about this. So team one is Anna, Blaine, Morrow, and Stanko. For the first scenario, a product owner has a high value change they want to make prior to the release. Even though it's breaking the scope of the release, we're going to work together to get it in. Team one, did you say that was, from an Agile standpoint, aligns or conflicts with these principles? What did you say, team one? That's Anna, Blaine, Morrow, Stanko. What did you say, team one? Aligns or conflicts?
Aligns.
I'm sorry, aligns? Aligns,
Yep.
how so?
Number two, welcomes changing requirements even late in development.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. So here's the thing. I'd say it aligns as well. If you look at that, scenario, there's one phrase at the very beginning. There's one phrase at the very beginning that makes the answer very easy. What's the phrase in the very beginning that makes the answer very easy?
High value change.
High value change, right? The high value part, because there's the big difference between high value change and low value change, right? In fact, question to the group, who's heard the term scope creep before? Who's heard the term scope creep before?
I definitely have.
Yes. So
I've experienced it for sure.
Yes. Scope creep, good or bad? Scope creep, good or bad? What do you think?
I mean, the end product can be good, but it makes planning very, very hard.
Yeah. Oh,
for those not familiar with the term, scope creep basically is kind of additional needs and requirements that are discovered after the initial kind of requirements are there. Scope creep, right? So it depends on how much.
Yeah. Well, scope creep sounds like it should be bad. It sounds like it should be bad because it literally has the word creep in it. It literally, there's no scenario where you can call me a creep and I take it as a compliment. That, you know,
creep sounds like it should be bad, but I propose this. I would say that scope creep is actually good because it represents new learnings. And what we do with new learnings is what we do with new learnings, meaning this. Let's say that we start a product and a stakeholder comes up and says, hey, if we do this one, we get $20 million more in revenue. That sounds great. Different stakeholder comes up and says, if we do this one, we get 500,000 more users on our platform. That sounds great as well. Different stakeholder comes up. This is help desk. They say, if we don't do this one, we'll lose half our user base. Well, that's good to know. Different stakeholder comes up. This is legal. Legal says, if we don't do this one, we are all going to jail, including me and you. Well, that's good to know as well. So what you have here is 4 different stakeholders with 4 different requests, with all with a high value / impact statement. So those we definitely want to get in sooner rather than later, right? But there's a big difference between that and arguing for the next 3 months over the perfect shade of blue for the website before we go live, right? So good job, team 1. I'd say that this does align with number 2. I think that's great. Let's go to team 2, which is Felix, Scott, and excuse me if I say this wrong, Piyush Kumar. Team 2, what did you say for the second scenario? Before each release, the team always finds himself behind their work. To account for this, they put in many extra hours to get it done. Was that good or bad, team 2?
It's a bad, I guess.
Yeah.
And we think like it's not aligned with the principle, but we are not able to figure it out which one.
Yeah. So why is this bad? I don't care. Who's heard this term before? Who's heard this term before? I don't care what it takes. You folks figure it out, get it all done. Who's heard that before? Right? What's the problem with that mindset? What's the problem with that mindset? I don't care what it takes, figure it out, get it all done.
It wastes time and energy and effort, and people get, upset and disgruntled over the whole process.
People get demotivated also.
Yes.
It's not sustainable.
So I'll tell you a quick story. So many years ago, I used to work for a small startup. Many years ago, I was a developer at a small startup. So from January to April, I had 2 days off total, including weekends. I worked every day but 2, right? Including weekends. I worked 7 days a week except for 2 from January to April. Now, when people say, why is this mindset bad? Here's one reason why it's bad. What do you think happened to me in April? Why do you think this ended in April?
You ended up in the hospital.
Well, it wasn't, fortunately for me, it wasn't that bad. Wasn't that bad. But what do you think happened in April? Wasn't as bad as the hospital, right?
You didn't get your product done. You didn't deliver.
Or, you know what? Guess what else is another option? I don't have to be here. You know what I did?
You quit.
I quit, right? Look, I realized, look, I don't have to be here. I quit. I put in my 2 weeks notice. I was out, right? Problem number 1 is this. In an environment where your people are working night and day, the danger is you get disengaged workforce, and which ultimately leads to potential turnover and retention issues, right? Which is a problem. In fact, when people leave, what type of people tend to leave first? What type of people tend to leave first?
Talented folks.
Yeah, that's not a bad call, but you know what it turns out to be? The type of people that tend to leave first are the ones that have the easiest time finding a new job, right? Which means this, if you try to replace these people, it's not that you can't replace them, but you are literally competing with the rest of the world for this type of person. What that means is that it's going to take longer, it's going to be harder, and it's going to be more expensive. So one problem that happens with this mindset of, I don't care what it takes, get it all done, stay day, night, just finish it. One problem is a disengaged workforce, which potentially leads to engagement, retention, and turnover issues. That's one problem. But the other problem is this. Let's say I'm in an environment where I'm working 6, 7 days a week, 10, 11 plus hours a day. What happens to my work? What happens to my work?
It suffers.
It suffers is correct. We know there's a difference between working controlled and working frantic. When you start working frantic, what happens is you make mistakes and you take shortcuts, right? In fact, in the same company, I remember I'm working there one night, it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm working, I'm coding away, and I remember saying this. I said, you know what? If this thing compiles, I'm done. Let the testers find it, right? And so the other issue is quality and defect issues, which as an organization is also very expensive to us. So I would agree that this scenario B is bad, and because what we want to do is we want to create a more sustainable pace versus the team always putting these Herculean efforts to get everything done. Good job, team 2. Let's go to team 3, which is Grayson, John, Melanie, and Moyne. Scenario C, distributed team. Some people here, some overseas, will use video Skype for phone calls,
and we'll do virtual video conferencing to kind of make this all work. What'd you say, team? What'd you say, team 3? Good or bad? Grayson, Melanie, and Moyne, what did you say? Was that good or bad? Does it align or conflict with these 12 principles?
Mr. Richards, actually, I didn't work with Agile first. Okay, but any other software I work with, we communicate through teamwork, through Zoom meeting or other thing, and we discuss about the things. Discuss about the things. What can we work with, and how can we do it? If there is any progress somebody has made, so we discuss about it. That's all. So we can reach to a solution, or we can proceed further. Further, we can get some more. You got it, I think so.
Okay, so just to kind of decompose some of that, I would say this for this last one. From an Agile standpoint, we love face-to-face communication, right? But in today's world, where so many of us are working remotely, here's what I would say. Principle number 6 says the most effective and efficient way of communication is face-to-face. In today's world, well, so we love face-to-face. We love having people together face-to-face. But in today's world where so many people are spread apart virtually, what we recommend is this. We recommend that if you can't be together physically, we recommend having all the tools in place to allow for virtual co-location, right? Which means, kind of like Moyne pointed out, we want to have tools like our like Zoom, like our instant messaging, like our screen sharing, like our collaboration portals. In an environment where we can't be together physically, we want to create virtual co-location, make sure that we have all the tools and working agreements in place. Instead of sending emails, let's call people, right? Let's have video conferences. Let's be able to see each other as much as possible, right? And so if you can't be together physically, what we want to do is have all tools and the working agreements in place to allow for virtual co-location. Any questions about these 3 scenarios so far? All right, let's do one more set of these, but the second set we're going to do together as a group. So I'm sharing my screen right now. Here is scenario D. The team is not completing all the work they thought they were going to complete each sprint. The team has decided to get more work done. They'll go from 2-week sprints to 4-week sprints. In the chat window, I want you to think of, from an Agile standpoint, would we consider this good or bad? Does it align or conflict with principles? From an Agile standpoint, would this align or conflict with 12 principles? In the chat window, type in either aligns or conflicts. For scenario D, in the chat window, type in if you think this aligns with the Agile principles or does it conflict with the Agile principles. Type in what you think in the chat window. Team can't get all their work done, so we're going to go from 2-week sprints to 4-week sprints. Is that good or bad from an Agile standpoint? Type in what you think. In the chat window, type in either aligns if you think it's good from an Agile standpoint, or conflicts if you think that is a problem from an Agile standpoint. Let's see some answers. Type in what you think in the chat window.
Sir?
Yes.
Is chat disabled?
Oh, can people not chat? It should be working. Are you guys not able to type in chat?
Hello, Richards.
Yes, can you hear me?
Is this I got 7th one is the right 7th principle. Is that right?
All right. Yeah. So type in your answer in chat window. I can see some people typing in. Anna, I see your chat should not be disabled. It should have a button that says chat. Should be able to type in chat. Conflicts?
It's working. It's my defective tool.
Oh no. Oh no.
It does open in a separate window for mine when I have my Zoom full screen, so I didn't see the chat window at first.
All right. Do you see it now? Awesome. That's great. I mean, I can see your test. So I would say this. You can say the answer out loud, but I would say for D that this conflicts, and here's why. Right now, we can't get all the work done in 2-week sprints, right? Now, if we can't get all the work done in 2-week sprints, the thing is, the danger is this. We go from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and we still can't get all the work done. The only thing we've done at this point is we've prolonged the feedback loop. I would suggest this. Going from shorter to longer isn't always a bad answer, but it's always a bad first answer, right? What I would do first
is if you can't get all your work done in 2 week sprints, what you would do is you first identify, why can't we get all our work done in 2 week sprints? And I can tell you this, based on my experience, the primary reason teams can't get all their work done in 2 week sprints is because it's not because they're bringing in too much work to the sprint. It's because the nature of the work they're bringing in is too big. It's because the nature of the work they're bringing in is too big. That's why. So for D, I think this does conflict, right? And I like what Prakushamar said. I think it conflicts with indeed number 3. Good answer. Good answer. Conflicts with number 3 is a good answer. Right. Let's go to scenario E. Product owner is excited rather than disappoint customer with incomplete demo. We'll wait till the end to show the product to the customer. What do you think that is? Is that good or bad? What do you folks think? Conflict or aligns? You can say either conflicts or aligns out loud or type in the chat window. What do you think? Instead of disappointing the customer with incomplete software demos, we'll show them at the end. Is that good or bad? What do you folks think?
Conflict.
Why does it conflict?
You know, I'm looking for the right answer, but it's like you want, if you want the constant feedback,
yeah.
I think you have to present whether or not it's perfect or not.
Yeah, and here's the concept, right? Think about this. When is the most expensive time to find out my customers don't like my product?
At the end.
At the end. The later you find out, the fewer and lesser options you have to address that feedback. When's the best time to figure out my customers don't like my product?
Now.
Yeah,
as soon as possible.
As soon as possible is correct. When should I be getting that feedback?
As soon as possible.
Early and
continuous.
Frequently.
Yes, early and often. Early and frequently is correct, right? And so what happens here is this does conflict, right, with number 1. Right? We want an early and continuous delivery valuable product. And so what we want to do is tell the customer the way you handle this. So to not disappoint them, we'll say, hey, customer, this isn't everything yet, right? But what I want to show you is the most important, most impactful features first. And if you don't like it, let me know now, because if we wait too long to give me that feedback, it might become obscenely expensive to address the feedback. Good. Last scenario, scenario F. Small company will have all the enterprise architect do the architecting. The data modelers do all the modeling, and the senior people do senioring, and the team will implement the solutions. Good or bad, aligns or conflicts? What do you folks think? Type your answer or say it out loud. Does it align or conflict with our 12 principles?
Conflicts with simplicity principles.
Yeah, Stanko, why does it conflict? If you could do something better and faster than me, shouldn't I have you do it every time?
Yeah, absolutely. They should start small and then build up.
But here's the problem, Stanko. Let's say it takes you 7 hours to do a job and it takes me 21 hours to do the exact same job, right? So it might make sense I'd have you do it every time. But here's the problem, Stanko. What if you're busy? What if you're on vacation? What if you leave the company, right? That's a problem. Question to the group, anyone ever been on a team where it felt like it was the same 1 or 2 people saving the team every time? Anyone ever been on that team? Okay. The danger is they start enjoying it. They start relishing it. What we want to do in our teams is we want to create more cross capabilities, right? It's not that everyone can do everyone else's job, but the fact is the more we can help each other out, the more and better options we have to solve problems, right? The only way, if in this example, for example, if our Stanko can do a job in 7 hours, it takes me 21 hours to do the same job. Every time he does and I don't, the gap grows bigger, right? The only way for me to learn is to try it. So if I'm a more senior person, maybe I mentor and pair with the more junior people to get them in a better place. So here, what we want to do is I don't want the same people doing the same jobs every time. What we want to do is grow capabilities at the team level. This conversation I've had all the time with some of my most senior folks is I'll say, look, as one of my best team members, I don't need more of you. I need more of you, right? I need you to take a throttle away from like delivering solutions and work with others to get them better. Anna, your point's great in the chat window here, right? The only way for me to get better is to actually do it, right? And so, what we want to do for F, I like number 11 a lot. And for F here, we want to pass decision-making down to a low level as responsibly possible while letting the team self-organize and be more cross-functional. Another quick example here is years ago, I worked for a team where we had an enterprise architect type, want to use XML shredding to bring the data. The team wanted to use relational database. So they argued back and forth for a while. Finally, the team said this. The team said, fine, we'll do it your way, but if this doesn't work, it's not our fault. The moment the team says that, what are the chances of that solution working? Right? The moment a team says, fine, we'll do it your way, but if this doesn't work, it's not our fault. If the team says that, what are the chances of that solution working? Not likely is right, because what happens is you've inadvertently created the incentive for sabotage. What we want to do is, now if there's a valid reason why we need XML shredding, for example, our data has to be interoperable with 4 other teams. They're all using XML to pass data back and forth. Okay, if we explain that to the team, that makes sense, and it becomes a domain constraint. But what we want to do is pass decision-making down to a low level as responsibly possible. Any questions about what we did here so far? I want to show you why we did what we did. At the end of the day, that's Agile. Agile is nothing more and nothing less than an umbrella concept. You can't do Agile. Agile at the end of the day is these 4 value points and these 12 principles. Right? Agile is a mindset. It's a way of thinking. It's a philosophical approach, underneath which we have Agile methods like Scrum, right? Most popular Agile method in the world is Scrum. 85% of the world that does Agile does Scrum or some form of an iterative incremental concept. For those familiar with Scrum, or not familiar with Scrum, at a high level, you have this product vision or product goal. You have this roadmap that gives you strategic alignment. You have your release layer, which oftentimes is integrated into your sprints. In Scrum, you do sprint planning. You have the sprint itself. You do review and a retro. You have your daily Scrums every day. Scrum is the most popular Agile method in the world. 85% of the world that does Agile does Scrum or some form of an iterative or incremental framework. Or the other 15% is Kanban. Kanban represents a real-time flow system where you have to visualize your work, put limits to your work in progress. You then manage your workflows. You make explicit policies and working agreements. You set feedback loops, and then you just improve from there. In Kanban, you establish a Kanban board so you can visualize your work, you put limits to your work in progress, and you flow your items through your Kanban board. Right? So Kanban and Scrum are your most popular Agile methods out there. Right? XP is also an Agile method, but XP, we don't see a lot in today's world, but there's a lot of practices that come from the XP world. Things like pair programming, test-driven development, continuous integration, continuous deployment, DevOps, research spikes, has its roots in the XP world. Agile is a mindset underneath which we have Agile methods. Any questions about that? So the way you use Agile is just like we did. When you make your day-to-day decisions, right? When you make your day-to-day decisions, when you set your policies, when you perform your actions, right? What you're going to look at is, does it align with these 4 value points? If so, you're probably taking an Agile approach to it. Well, does it align with these 4 value points and these 12 principles? Because if so, you're probably taking an Agile approach to it. But if not, then you may want to rethink that approach. If not, you may want to rethink that approach. Yeah. Any questions so far? One quick note. So years ago, I was reading an article. I was reading an article in some magazine. It said something like 14 reasons why I hate Agile. Right? So I said, oh, this will be good. Let's see why they hate Agile. Reason number 1, I hate Agile because I think that the team meeting together for 15 minutes every day is a complete waste of time. Right? So let's look at this. If I look at the 4 value points here, if I look at the 12 principles, is there anything in there about the team meeting together for 15 minutes every day? What's that practice called? Open question to the group. What's that practice called where the team meets together for 15 minutes every day? Anyone know what practice,
Daily Scrum.
That's called?
Daily Scrum, stand up, whatever.
Scrum or stand up is correct. That is correct. It's a daily Scrum or daily stand up. That's a Scrum practice. That's a Scrum practice. You can't say you hate Agile because of that. You can say you hate Scrum because of that. You can't say you hate Agile because of that, right?
Sure.
The article then said, I hate Agile because I think 2 developers working together to solve a problem, complete waste of time. So let's look at our manifesto here. Anything in here about developers working together to solve a problem?
No.
Anything in here about 2 developers working together to solve a problem?
No.
No.
Anyone know what that practice is called?
Is that the extreme programming
It's
stuff?
close. It is extreme programming stuff. It's called
Okay.
pair programming. It's called pair programming. That practice is called pair programming. It comes from the XP world. You can say, I hate XP because I don't believe in pair programming, but you can't say you hate Agile. Agile doesn't force you to do this. So what happens here is Agile has the mindset. What we have is there's practices that Scrum, Kanban, and XP propose, but Agile is the mindset, right, versus the practices. Any questions? Kanban, well, the short answer, Chaitanya, is Kanban is a flow system where you visualize your workflow, and then unlike Scrum, where you have start and stops, things flow into my Kanban and flow out of the Kanban. Things flow into my Kanban and flow out of the Kanban. You visualize the flow, and you flow things to the Kanban. So it's a real-time flow system that focuses on limiting your work in progress, no more than 3 items. In this example Kanban board, no more than 3 items in development, no more than 4 items in testing, no more than 5 items in our ready to release. Right? So Kanban is a real-time flow system, which, by the way, if you want to learn more about Kanban, I highly recommend taking one of our Kanban courses. They're great classes to learn more about Kanban. Oh, quick note before I close out as well. Let me share with you my contact information once again. So in the chat window, let me put in my contact info. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. Feel free to join me on Twitter. And feel free to shoot me an email at any point as well. Any other questions from the group before we close out? All right, well, thanks everyone for all your time and attention today. Great work in your groups. Feel free to reach out at any point. And other than that, everyone enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays. And I hope to work with all of you again at some point. Thanks everyone very much. All right,
Thanks.
Scott, good seeing you again
Thank
since
you.
yesterday. A lot of